Welcome, kindred souls. I'm your host, 10 Past Fate. The video you're about to watch will touch on sensitive topics. Primarily, we will be discussing depression. However, we will also speak briefly on other issues such as suicide, self-diagnosis, different facets of our societal construct, and more. While this project has been compiled using information from a multitude of sources, please keep in mind the following 3 disclaimers. Firstly, this video is subjective. Although there are many facts interspersed throughout, they serve only to highlight and underpin my own personal opinion as pertaining to depression and any other topics covered. Secondly, please keep at the forefront of your mind that this video covers an extremely important and widespread problem that is only becoming more conspicuous as time passes. Due to limitations in time, however, the majority of items herein will be covered at surface level only, as each fact could be a video in its own right. And finally, while extensive sources have been perused in an attempt to combine information and add factual supporting evidence to this discussion, this video is by no means intended to be taken as medical advice. If you are concerned that yourself or somebody you care about is displaying signs of depression, then please seek the appropriate medical help. Thank you. Welcome back, thinkers. We are now about to delve into the main body of this video, which is divided into 5 sections, each with their own various subsections. The 5 sections are as follows. What is depression? What causes depression? How is depression treated? How do our own bad habits contribute to the development of depression? And the embellishment effect. So without further ado, let's begin. What is depression? Classification. For the purposes of this video, we will first establish a consensus of what depression is. Depression is classified as a low mood that persists for a long time. Long is of course relative and varies depending on the type of and severity of the depression being experienced. As is with the case of dysthymia, for example, this could be 2 years or more. Whereas in the case of severe depression, this typically is considered to be 2 weeks. Characteristics of depression. There are many different factors that must be considered when attempting to ascertain whether or not an individual may be experiencing depression. These range from, but are not limited to, self-exclusion from social events, lack of pleasure in areas that would usually offer enjoyment, decline of interest in hobbies, loss of sexual desire, sleeping for long periods of time, feelings of guilt, pessimism, self-harm, and suicidal thoughts. At this point, it would be pertinent to clarify that no isolated sign is definitive proof. All indicators must be assessed within a wider context, and several observable signs must be experienced together before determining a diagnosis. Diagnosis. When considering mental health, it's very difficult to reach a diagnosis as there are a myriad of obstacles to overcome. Typically, if you were worried that you may be undergoing a form of depression, your first line of inquiry would be to attend your local doctors. There are no physical tests that can be performed that will offer an insight as to what's happening. Nonetheless, it is vital to be honest in your Discord, as your medical professional will attempt to understand your emotional feelings and how they appear to be impacting your day-to-day life. When it comes to diagnosing major depressive disorder, there are some guidelines that can aid in reaching a conclusion, and they are as follows. Feeling sad or irritable for most of the day. Becoming less interested in most activities that were once enjoyed. Sudden weight change accompanied by a change in appetite. A change in sleeping habits. Feeling restless. A lack of energy. Feeling worthless or guilty. Difficulty concentrating or indecisiveness. And consideration of self-harm. In this case, you would have to be experiencing 5 of the aforementioned signals, with at least 1 of them every day for 2 weeks. Types of depression. The ensuing categories of depression, while not exhaustive, present the reality that this is a genuine dilemma and takes a slew of different forms. Those suffering with any emotional or mental difficulty certainly need support. Notwithstanding, the help needed is not always what is preferably wanted. Dysthymia, a continuous mild depression that lasts for 2 years or longer, also referred to as persistent depressive disorder or chronic depression. Prenatal depression, often called antenatal depression. This depression strikes during pregnancy. Postnatal depression. This form of depression occurs in the weeks and months after becoming a parent and can strike men too. Seasonal affective disorder, abbreviated to SAD, typically affects people in the winter months as days grow shorter and sunlight becomes sparser. Psychotic depression, severe depression accompanied by hallucinations, delusional thinking, and other forms of psychosis. And manic depression, better known as bipolar disorder, characterized by bouts of mania followed by bouts of depression. What causes depression? The medical industry answer. When conversing with healthcare professionals, you will find varying opinions on how best to approach the issue. Nonetheless, on one point, there is a general concurrence. We just don't know. We're told that the following can all be considered causative factors: genetics, personality, loneliness, alcohol and drugs, and stressful events. The effect of stress. It is my firm belief that one detail is becoming abundantly evident, and that is that depression always has a trigger, predominantly stress. Take for example the preceding influences. Genetics can cause an individual to possess a lower stress tolerance level. Personality can elicit a different emotional response and make you more susceptible to stressful situations. Loneliness leads to stress since you must operate without support in everything that you do. Alcohol and drugs cause physical and psychological stress chemically. And stressful events are by their very definition stressful. Indeed, the effects of stress are rather well documented and incorporate the subsequent symptoms. On your body, headaches, change in sex drive, insomnia and fatigue. On your mood, anxiety, loss of focus, lack of motivation, irritability and sadness. And on your behaviour, a change in eating habits and social withdrawal. The list continues, however constraints on time prevent me from delving into it much further. This is a topic for a video in and of itself. Suffice it to say that I believe stress to be the underlying factor behind all but the most serious forms of depression, such as bipolar and psychotic depression. This assertion garners more prevalence if we contemplate a condition known as premenstrual dysphoric disorder, or PMDD. This ailment is listed as a motivator for depression and displays the following manifestations: mood swings, anxiety, irritability, tiredness, trouble sleeping, headaches, spotty skin, greasy hair, change in appetite, and a change in sex drive. Many of these factors are experienced as previously stated by people under stress. The dishonourable mention of MKUltra. If we therefore continue to play devil's advocate, we can touch ever so briefly on a clandestine experiment performed by the American government on its own populace in the 1950s, named MKUltra. In its most basic and fundamental form, MKUltra tested the breaking point of the human mind using unsuspecting victims and different methods. The following scratches only the surface and is shocking to say the least, but functions to add context. Victims were lured via prostitutes to safe houses and then drugged and studied. People were abused physically, sexually, and emotionally. People were subjected to sensory deprivation. Inspired by the Nazis, MKUltra auspiciously proved that extreme stress, albeit emotional, physical, or chemical, is more than capable of breaking the mind. Treating depression. Antidepressants. There are over 30 different types of antidepressants. Moreover, most work in similar ways. altering the chemicals in your brain. Take for example Prozac. This drug belongs to a class of antidepressants known as SSRIs, or selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. They work by supposedly replenishing the feel-good drug in your brain, more precisely serotonin. As we have already discussed, the medical industry does not possess enough information to be able to accurately decipher the root cause of depression. As a little bit of trivia, pharmaceutical companies are reticent to grant independent researchers access to their clinical trials. Furthermore, in 2015, the pharmaceutical company GlaxoSmithKline was forced to publish full reports of their clinical trials as pertaining to the side effects of antidepressants on teenagers. The shocking reports actually detailed that there was an increase in suicidal tendencies in those taking their antidepressants. Consider the following. The side effects of antidepressants are almost identical to the symptoms of depression, including, but not limited to, insomnia, loss of sex drive, anxiety, and suicidal thoughts. In this way, the fear is that antidepressants can all too easily become cyclical. If you were to explain to your doctor that you were experiencing the earlier mentioned side effects, they would suggest that you are slipping back into depression and prescribe you yet more antidepressants. Veritably, there are studies confirming that those who wean themselves off of their treatment are far less likely to suffer the side effects, inherently proving that the treatment can be just as bad as the condition. Self-help. Antidepressants aren't the only option. They're just one of the more common. In truth, all healing processes begin from within. Just as we feel physical pain as an indicator that something unpleasant has occurred to our bodies, so too do we feel deep emotional pain when something is wrong in our lives. Most of us have heard of Einstein's misattributed quote, "Insanity is repeating the same mistakes and expecting different results." Say that back to yourself, because it's what we all do, every day of our lives. It is no less profound today than it was in 1981's publication of Narcotics Anonymous. We must learn to analyze our lives, not from the position of a victim, but from the perspective of a student. All great solutions stem from the fundamental question, why? Only by inquisitively asking ourselves this can we begin to understand a problem. Why is this happening to me? Why am I miserable? And as we begin to weave through the emotional minefield that is our lives, we can finally isolate problems and conceptualize solutions. Self-help starts with a decision. Make a change. In attempting to help ourselves out of depression, we must first be prepared to make a change. Stress is abundant in all of our lives, and in this age of monetary madness, it seems almost inescapable. But there are measures that we can implement in order to reduce the amount of pressure that we feel. It starts with our attitude. Understanding that our perception is a habitual quality and our minds are malleable. We must learn to become our own sculptor. Self-awareness is equally crucial. Knowing what discernible signs we tend to display when slipping into a depressive state can help us exponentially in halting the process. Do we become less productive? Do we allow our personal hygiene to slip? Whatever observable indicators correspond to us, the moment we are aware of them, we are no longer helpless. Exercise. In 1936, a Canadian biochemist named Hans Selye published a study claiming that there are two types of stress, eustress and distress. For all intents and purposes, eustress is a good stress. Through evolution, we have biological mechanisms that are ingrained so as to ensure our survival. This is known as fight or flight. All forms of stress release cortisol into our bodies. Cortisol is a potent chemical that wreaks havoc on us at a cellular level if left unfettered. Eustress is our fight or flight system. It is a motivator that facilitates a response. Upon acting on the problem, our cortisol levels gradually recede to normality. Distress, on the other hand, is entirely negative. It occurs when there is no physical outlet for the cortisol buildup, which is all too common in our sedentary digital age. Regular exercise, even for just 15 minutes a day, can help to reduce any stress hormones in your body and clear your mind. This will predominantly leave you in far better shape, both physically and emotionally, but also as a tertiary benefit, can even lead to networking and socializing. I cannot overstate the importance of this. Music. Sometimes we need to feel upset, to grieve as a part of the healing process. It is natural, especially if we have perhaps lost a loved one. In those moments, how many of us throw on a song that is subjectively sad to us? Music is the purest form of catharsis, and it should therefore come as no surprise that there is actually a field known as musical therapy, in which music is used to help improve people's physical and emotional health. Sometimes, something as simple as playing the radio in the background while we think can help to steer our emotional state onto a more positive path. Writing lyrics to a song can help us to express ourselves, just as attempting to create something musically or learning an instrument can elevate us out of a dark place. Just as the intellectual Marcus Tullius Cicero once said, "Man is his own worst enemy." We contribute to our own downfall through indecision, apathy, fear and silence, and yet, what this great sophist neglected to mention was that man is also his own best friend. We can highlight our own mistakes and actively work to learn from and eventually correct them. Food. Food is one of the biggest contributors to health problems. The predicament is that we eat too much that is bad for us and, quite simply, not enough that is good for us. Take sugar, for example. Sugar lights up the brain in much the same way that cocaine does. It is 99% pure calories with zero beneficial vitamins, minerals, fats, or even proteins. Adjusting our diet to be one of a more balanced intake can make incredible improvements to our physical, mental, and emotional well-being. Additionally, excessive sugar intake has been observed to culminate not only in adverse physical effects, but also negatively impacts our mental health. Technology. We spend far too much time on our phones, tablets, computers and consoles, and not enough time developing our minds and bodies. As a matter of fact, 4G and 5G technology, which are now a standard on most mobile phones, have been linked to cancer, heart disease, insomnia, and, in keeping with the theme of the video, depression and other mental health problems. We must begin to limit the time that we spend on these devices. Getting into the habit of taking an hour or two away from all of the technology can yield incredible results for your emotional health. Use this time to exercise or develop a tangible hobby that doesn't require anything with a processor or a SIM card. Television. Television has been instrumental in the breakdown of our cultural and moral values. Take, for example, the following shows: Keeping Up with the Kardashians, Tamara's World, and My Crazy Life. They all have one thing in common. They flaunt the wealth of celebrities in our faces. The disparity between rich and poor has never been as large as it is today. Repetition, ironically, is the most fundamental form of mind control. How many of us dream of winning the lottery or making it big? How many of us wish we were footballers or singers or actors, rather than doctors, builders, mothers or fathers? Our priorities have become inverted through the constant barrage of self-righteous, pompous drivel that is thrown at us. We now dream of a life of wealth above a life of meaning. We have been conditioned to believe that we are in competition with each other, when nothing could be further from the truth. Social media. Social media is making us miserable. It has become a breeding ground for virtue signaling and popularity contests. People now would rather take pictures of their food for Instagram and Facebook instead of sitting down and enjoying it. We have become so obsessed with convincing everybody else that our lives have meaning, that in retrospect, our lives have lost all meaning. This inversion is just as apparent as with television. We need to stop existing through our little screens and begin living through our eyes and bodies. How many of us have hundreds, if not thousands, of friends on various different social media networks, most of whom we never even talk to? How many of us feel the need to keep a diary online for the world to see, as if in some way it makes us a better person? We must begin to step away from the virtual society that is Facebook and those akin to it. Set aside some time and dedicate it to staying away from social media each day. Whenever you feel the need to access these sites, look around for a task that needs doing and get stuck in. You'll find yourself far more productive and eventually emotionally stable. The embellishment effect. There are today tenfold as many people suffering with depression than there was in 1945. Our lives now, I would confidently argue, are far easier than they were at the conclusion of the Second World War, when the weight of rebuilding a nation rested heavily upon the shoulders of brave men, women, and children. This is a generation, more than most others, that had to deal not only with the painful loss of loved ones, but with pressure, expectation, and change. Their heroes were those who made the ultimate sacrifice, innovators, thinkers, and warriors. Today, our heroes are those with either the most money, the most tattoos, or the most looks. We have a generation who don't know what walking down the street to knock on their friend's door is, because they can simply text. Courting is done through Facebook and other online services. All of this culminates in a life of extreme convenience. Factor in, if you will, the following statement. Stress can be caused by not having enough work, activities, challenge, or stimulus. With this in mind, we can begin to piece together the puzzle. Most people think that they're a victim of something because they're not used to inconvenience or challenge. Where a victim was once somebody who had been the target of a crime or travesty, now a victim is somebody you disagree with. It is somebody whose myopic perception of the world is challenged. This is no more obvious than in the case of those who claim to have the flu, when in reality they have a cold. Or those who claim to be depressed when they're simply going through a normal emotional response to loss or complication. The problem with embellishment is that it detracts from those who are genuinely suffering. In the USA, the population count rests at roughly 330 million, and shockingly, suicide is the 8th largest cause of death. Additionally, 80% of all suicides are believed to be amongst people who suffer with depression. If so many people felt as though they could talk about their condition, would they be so desperate as to believe their only way out would be to take their own life? Embellishment muddies the waters. It belittles the topic until it is little more than taboo. It has to stop. For those of you who made it this far, thank you so much for the support. If you, or somebody you know, suffers with depression, or if you would like to raise awareness, please consider sharing this video. If you enjoyed the content and would like to see more content similar to this, then please hit subscribe. Remember, people with depression do need help and support, and if you are worried that you may be suffering with depression, please seek the proper medical advice. But never forget, you are important, and you will get through this. Until next time, I've been 10 Past Fate, and I'll see you on the next video.